ladies and so on, I'm Brooke Riot, and in this video I'm going to walk you through all the rest of the Kingdom Hearts games from the 1980s. This is going to be a long one. This is the third video in the series. This is also where it gets good. And if you need to catch up with the story so far, there's a playlist in the description. So, if you're familiar at all with the Kingdom Hearts timeline, you know it can get pretty complicated, and in the 80s, they especially didn't like to give a lot of information with games. So, at the end of this video, I will be going through all of them on a timeline with where I think they fit in with the mainline games, and I'm also going to rank them just for fun. So, Mickey Mousecapade's up first. I lost the footage of my first run of this game, and all the footage I have is going to have cheats enabled, just so you know up front. I was only ever able to get past level 1 without turning cheats on anyway, because that second level is honestly one of the toughest. Also, this technically came out before Final Fantasy. It was originally released in 1987 in Japan only for the family computer, which I didn't realize until I did that first video, because the NES release came out a year later, and that's the version that we got in the US. So, yeah, Mickey Mousecapades is not very good, and it's way too hard, but it makes a lot of sense that this game exists, because Final Fantasy is so different from all that other stuff, and it feels like such a big finished game. And this is kind of like a bridge between that and everything we saw before it, in a way. It doesn't play the same way, but it has a lot of elements that we've seen in the older games, and a lot that we'll see more of moving forward. Like, Mickey can use magic in this game, I think. Once you get the star pickup, that lets you throw stars at enemies. I'm not completely sure that's magic. You'll remember that he learned magic, though, in a previous game, The Sorcerer's Apprentice. There's a pirate ship, just like Final Fantasy, and wouldn't you know it, there's also brooms that can clean by themselves, just like Final Fantasy. So I guess that came from this game before that one. It's got doors that you can't open until you come back with special keys, which makes it the first Kingdom Hearts game to feature keys. Probably. I don't know what all the collectibles were in some of the older games, like Adventures of Tron might have had a key. It's hard to tell. It's even got a party system, this one, not Adventures of Tron, even though Minnie doesn't really do anything except follow you around. This is totally another fantasy game, so the title Final Fantasy also just makes a little bit more sense with that in mind. Okay, so you start in this funhouse level, and it took me a lot of tries before I realized I could shoot, but this part actually isn't that hard once you get the hang of it. You just have to watch out for the boss at the end of the level, because if you touch her, you die. But there are a lot of health pickups if you shoot all the things in all the rooms. Like I said, this was the only part of the game I beat without cheating. I had a lot of trouble doing the ocean level that comes right after it, so I just used some Game Genie codes to beat the rest of the game. It's fine to do that. At the end of the ocean level, there's a crocodile, and then you go to the forest stage, which is definitely the worst and longest. In the forest, you just have to guess the right trees to walk into that take you to the next season, and if you get one wrong, it takes you back to an earlier map. It's all trial and error, and some of them are hidden and take a lot of shots to show up, so figuring out those doors were there took forever, and even when I did, it started throwing secret doors at me that took me all the way back to the spring map anyway. Terrible level. And then at the end you fight a snake. But here's where it gets interesting. See, after the snake is the pirate ship, and guess what the boss of this stage is gonna be? No, it's a Kingdom Hearts character. No, but you're getting warmer. Okay, it's Pete, America's bad boy. OMG, Pete. Hi, Pete. Wow, who'd have thought? Pete! That's so cool! He's not the only character to make his debut in this game either. As soon as you get to the next stage, you'll find another classic Kingdom Hearts mid-boss, the Card Soldiers. They're just regular enemies here, of course, because they're not very strong, and never will be. But look, it's Mr. Peanut. What? Get out of here, Mr. Peanut. Now it's Pete again. Yay, it's Pete!
So, of course, since he's here, you know who the boss of this stage is going to be already. Pete's boss, Maleficent, making her debut as the final boss of the game. And look, it turns out she captured Alice! No doubt trying to steal her pure heart to create the Key of Hearts, just like in Kingdom Hearts Final Mix. So, this game really feels like a missing piece to the overall series, not just in bridging the gap between Final Fantasy and all the games before it, but showing us how far back the battle between light and darkness goes, with Mickey, Minnie, and Alice on one side, and Pete, Maleficent, and Mr. Peanut on the other. Wow, Nomura was really cooking with this one. I think this game has definitely been the most lore important so far. It really sets the stage for the later games, so this is a real treat for me as a Kingdom Hearts fan. I was totally blown away by how much of what the series is today started right here in 1987. I'd go so far as to say that Mickey Mousecapades is an essential game to understand the full story of Kingdom Hearts. It's a real shame that the game isn't any good, because it's quickly become one of my favorites. And then, you got Donald the Hero over here, which... So the thing you do... So this game is... What? The buttons... Okay, so this is a Commodore 64 exclusive game, and it has music, and Donald Duck is in it. Next we got Mickey Mouse for Commodore 64 and a bunch of other old home computers. This is the third game so far in the series that's just called Mickey Mouse. So, in this Mickey Mouse, you play as Mickey Mouse again, and this time you've got infinity hammers to work with, and also the worst gun ever. It's the worst gun ever for two reasons. One, it can only kill ghosts, and two, it hurts you whenever you use it. You have to fight through 4 towers and board up all the rooms in every tower. Some rooms are top-down mazes, some rooms have a bunch of pegs you have to hammer in, and some of them have bubbles that burst the platforms you're standing on. You have to hit the bubbles with the hammers before they can do that. It's really hard. The whole time you're trying to do all of that, you're also fighting ghosts, skeleton ghosts, Frankenstein's monsters, and Frankenslime's monsters. I was playing this one in a browser again. I did try to properly download a bunch of different versions, but for all these old home computers, the emulation is just like, it doesn't work that good, and when it does, it's still confusing AF. So anyway, my game crashed on the 3rd tower, and I legitimately tried to give it another play after I finished the rest of all the games in this video. I couldn't even get it to run anymore, and I'm not sure why. But here's some rando beating it on YouTube.com. So, yeah, it's actually Disney Castle the whole time. Mickey already lives there in this one, although he might not be the king yet. Anyway, thanks, rando. I'm still kind of mad at this game, though. Mickey and Minnie's Fun Time Print Kit. I can't find a version of this one to download, but it's not lost media because you can get it on eBay for like 20 bucks. Be neat if someone did that. In Donald's Alphabet Chase, we catch up with our pal Donald Duck, who has every letter of the alphabet hiding around his house, and he needs to find them or else they will just trash the place. So, all you have to do is, whenever you're in a room, it'll tell you which buttons to push up in the corner. You type the letters, and then he'll catch those letters. Catch all 26 of them, and you win the game. So, pretty easy. The graphics are definitely the best we've seen so far. And there's a lot of attention to detail around Donald's house. Like, he's got a framed picture of Scrooge McDuck in his room. And he's got a Mickey Mouse rug. And a Mickey Mouse calendar. And also a Mickey Mouse ball. So he's a big Mickey Mouse fan. Honestly, bigger than I would have thought, even though I know they're friends. When the letter B turns on his TV, Mickey Mouse is there too. I just can't get away from that guy. So I'm gonna guess, based on the merchandise and TV appearances that we're supposed to gather, that Mickey is already the king when this game takes place. Matterhorn Screamer. Goofy finally gets his own game, and his name isn't even in the title. Actually, nobody's said it yet, so he's just an unnamed dog guy, as far as anyone still knows at this point. Unless it's in the manual or something, which I didn't read. Anyway, this is one of the most frustrating games I've ever played, which is mostly because you have to know in advance exactly where you're allowed to jump from, or else Goofy will just jump right off the mountain. You can't jump on any platforms that are lower than you either, so these flags over here are impossible to get without losing a life. I don't know if that's the intended experience, but it was definitely mine. I actually tried 3 different versions before I found one that could get going. In the DOS version, the jump just wouldn't get me off the ground at all. The Commodore 64 version mostly worked, but it did still feel pretty broken. Like, playable, but not totally completable. I did keep playing until I made my way to the top of the mountain. But I didn't get every single flag because I really don't think I possibly could have. Maybe if I threw away every one of my extra lives on the slightly out of the way flags and just never messed up, but that's a lot easier said than done when pushing the up button just kills you unless you're standing in the right spot. And even then, there's probably too many flags for that to work anyway. So yeah, you could argue that I didn't complete this game either, I guess. It's really frustrating, you know, having a YouTube channel and trying to record all these games and then like half of them just aren't even playable. It's like, what am I even doing here? So apparently Matterhorn just means peak in the meadows in German. And I'm the Screamer, because this game has got me like...
So the next game is called Donald Duck, but only in Japan. In North America, it's called Snoopy's Silly Sports Spectacular. Now, the more perceptive members of my audience will recognize that Snoopy is actually a completely different character who is not Donald Duck. But these games do have identical gameplay, there's just a pretty different coat of paint slapped on them. See, they're both actually based on alternative world games, a game which is British, but was released in North America under the name Sports-A-Roni. And Sports-A-Roni has 2 additional games that are not featured in Donald Duck or Snoopy's Silly Sports Spectacular. Alternative World Games, by the way, is actually a parody of World Games by Epix, which they released as part of their games series of games that also included summer games, winter games, and California games. So there's a lot going on here.
Lore-wise, you got Donald, Louie, Daisy, Huey, and Dewey all here in an Italian cloud, although they seem to live in this American cloud because they had to travel to the games, or at least Donald did. I guess the rest of them could have already been in the Italian cloud. Why else even hold the games in the Italian cloud if all the athletes are from the American cloud? Anyway. There are 6 games, and you can have up to 2 players, so I played it by myself and then once against Maple, who, as you might remember, struck the final blow against Chaos in my last video. I thought I'd be able to one-up her this time around since I had more practice, and that should have happened, but it didn't. So the first game is a sack race. There are an ungodly amount of manholes in this road, but aside from that, it's just mash till you crash. Then you got this boot toss. So I got an A in high school physics, and I remember that the best angle to throw a thing at is 45 degrees. But in this game it isn't, so Nomura probably only got a B or a C in physics, or else how come he don't know that? Anyway, you actually do wind up by spinning your thumb around on the D-pad, but we're from the future where we have joystick, and that made it easier to spin thumbs, but probably not easier to aim. I think the pogo one came next, and that's the hardest one because I did beat it one time and I've got footage of me beating it, so that's pretty cool. Usually neither of us made it past the first hurdle, though the timing is really tricky. There's Gondola Sumo, which should absolutely be a real sport, but the way they do it in this game, it just looks a little too violent. Anyway, this is the one event I'm going to concede Maple is actually just better than me at. I don't know how. All you do is walk up and smack a duck over and over. Okay, so this right here, though, this is the pizza balance game, where you have to try and balance 20 pizzas across the finish line, which I did really carefully with only 1.1 seconds left on the clock. I didn't drop a single pizza. Maple, on the other hand, finished with only 4 pizzas, but got a better time bonus than I did, and somehow got nearly 4 times as many points as I did for this event. That's not fair. I did a better job. I clearly did a better job. Those scores are no good. And then lastly, there's the pole vault. Okay, so there are 2 modes, and in the first mode, you just practice all the games as much as you want, and in the second mode, you do all 6 in a row, and then it totals up your scores, and if you did good enough, you get to go again, and if you didn't do good enough, you get a game over. And because of the pizza problem, I didn't get a good enough score to move on, but Maple did. And it did just have her continue playing one-player mode until the next round, where she didn't get enough points. I know what you're all thinking, but we talked it out, and despite this betrayal, we are gonna stay together. Gonna wrap up 1988 with Final Fantasy II. This is a sequel to Final Fantasy, so you get to pick names for all the party members again, and I wasn't about to do the same thing I did last time because I figured right off this was gonna have more of a storyline going in with it. It starts you off by throwing you right into a battle and killing you, and the first thing the game teaches you when you wake up is that you can learn words in this game and then use them to talk to people later. That's a mechanic you might expect from a point and click and not an RPG. And I love point and clicks, even more than I love RPGs, so I'm all about this. And yeah, they really get inventive with the mechanics all throughout this game. It kind of has a reputation for how the different stats will level up individually based on how much you use them. I was getting killed by some enemies pretty early on that were like 10 feet away from the really weak starting enemies. And I wasn't getting enough experience from just the starting enemies, but I knew from listening to other people whine about this game that I could just punch myself in the face and get stronger. I have no problem with this mechanic. So the plot is that you're fighting against an evil empire as rebels, but Bluey goes missing in the first scene, so you've got to find Bluey's clues. That means taking the new word you learned and saying it to a guy who works at a bar with a bunch of Imperial soldiers, but they don't hear you, and they don't see you leave through a secret passage that takes you to the wounded soldier formerly known as a prince. And then you go back to his girlfriend, and she's like, "Did he say anything about me?" And he totally did, but you're just like, "Oh no." Anyway, which is awesome. So awesome that this guy, Minwa, gives you a boat and joins your party, even though he's way stronger than any of you are. And together, you set off to look for Sid. You know, Sid. He's younger than he is in Kingdom Hearts, and he's still working on airships, so this game probably takes place earlier than the first Final Fantasy game. Except for the timeline got reset at the end of that one, so really, this probably takes place, like, after it, but just not in the sense of, like, linear time. Anyway, the airship takes you to a ton of different places, but unlike Final Fantasy I, you don't really want to explore too much in this game, at least this early on, because there are no clear barriers between the weak monsters that you want to fight and the really strong monsters that will wipe your party. And also, fleeing just doesn't work. So, what you gotta do is, you gotta go to this cold town and meet Joseph, who spells his name just like Stalin. He also lives in a cold place, has a mustache but no beard, wears green, and fights against an evil empire. Coincidence. Well, Joe says you gotta go free the slaves from the mines or he won't help you. But that's no big deal, because freeing slaves from mines is never really a bad idea. So you go do that.
Now, at this point in the video, I did have to take about a week off from working on the project, because something pretty big came up. If you're watching this as it comes out, you might already know what I'm talking about, but in case you're watching this as a finished project in 2056, there used to be this really famous rapper named BBL Drizzy, and he had a lot of hits like the Wii Shop Channel theme, and the Nickelodeon show Degrassi. But about a month or two ago, another famous rapper by the name of Ken Dot strangled BBL Drizzy to death in front of his entire family and then raised his son as his own child. As a big fan of BBL Drizzy's music, including the songs I Am a Lesbian, I Love Bed, and who could forget the story of Adidon, I was absolutely devastated by this loss. I had to take about 5 days off just for mourning, and after that, I had to fly all the way to Toronto to meet with the other vegetarians, because BBL Drizzy was also a very public supporter of the vegan movement, among other things maintaining a close friendship with fellow YouTubist Tony Fountains. So we all got together and agreed to declare a public holiday in his honor. So from now on, every year on May 4th, we're all going to feast on beef. I decided that I would leave this segment in so that I could watch it age afterward. Thank you.
So, going back to the game after all that, I realized that I couldn't remember where any of the towns were on the map. And in any other RPG, this wouldn't be that big of a deal, but in this one it's a huge deal, because every time you guess wrong, you die, and you have to remember not to go there again, which means you have to rely on your internal map. That happens to be one of my few weaknesses. I got no sense of direction. I just follow the little arrows or map markers, both in video games and real life. So, this is the part where I spend the longest time running around dying, just completely lost. I did finally eventually work my way back to the town where Sid was hanging out, and I took an airship back to the starting town. My next mission was to go check up on that dreadnought the Empire was building, and wouldn't you know it, it turned out they had just finished building the thing, and immediately used it to destroy pretty much every town they hadn't occupied. Although destroy is kind of a generous term here, it would be more accurate to say they decimated these villages. Like, in the literal sense of the word, meaning to reduce by 1/10. They didn't blow up any of the shops, inns, churches, or anybody who works there in any of these places, and in most of them that means the overwhelming majority of the population is doing just fine, and it barely even affects the rebel economy, which might be a pretty cynical way to look at it from my point of view, but to the Empire, who's trying to wipe out the rebels for good, they should be taking commerce into account. The rebellion leaders are untouched too, including the king I haven't mentioned yet, who's been so sick for this whole game that he hasn't gotten out of bed. Now, Minwa does decide at this point to stay behind and look after the king, so it's just the family again for now, but not for very long. I did manage to wander into something good for once at around this part of the game, the hidden chocobo forest. Wow, chocobos! Big, beautiful birds that let you ride on them, and it'll play the chocobo theme. A really annoying version of it, actually, especially if you try to take the opportunity to get a better idea of the map like I did. After a couple minutes of this, my cat had enough and jumped off my lap and out of the room in a huff. After doing a little detective work using that cool keyword system, I found out the next thing I needed to do was talk to Stalin again, and when he saw the open slot, he couldn't help but insert himself into my party. He's an unarmed fighter, which seems to just scale better than any of the other classes because he's able to keep up without having to pay for or upgrade weapons. I wouldn't trade my dual-wielding axes for it though, those are still way better because I get to attack twice and they're both really strong. So, Bandit, Chili, Bingo, and Joseph Stalin go on an adventure to find the Goddess's Bell, which in a really indirect way is the key to taking down the Dreadnought. BTW, I think it's weird to call War Machine Dreadnought. Like, if I'm dreading not, that means I'm not worrying about anything, right? Like, being told we gotta take down the don't even worry about it ship doesn't exactly strike fear into my heart or whatever. Anywho, the Goddess's Bell turns out to be kept by giant beavers. Aww! And luckily, Bingo happens to speak beaver, which comes as a shock even to Bandit and Chili. It's a good thing though, because otherwise that probably would have been it for this adventure. You always gotta be building those weird little skills, ladies and so on. They'll definitely save the world one day. Okay, so we do get the bell, but on the way out we have to fight this guy, who somehow brought a giant rock with him, and it squishes Joey Stalls to death. So, the next thing is we gotta take it to this place that has a big flame, but we need to get a special torch from back here. And as soon as we get back there, we meet up with another pal by the name of Gordy. And old Gordo is really weak, not good for much, but at least Bluey's seat is being kept nice and warm by this line of randos. He has a spear and shield. I kind of started to suspect as soon as I saw him fight with that spear though, that pretty much all defensive tactics in this game are kind of counterproductive in the long run. Bingo is pretty much a berserker, and just look at that magnificent health bar. Meanwhile, Chili's been in the back row, and Bandit's been carrying the shield around, and both of them are just not keeping up when it comes to defending themselves, just on account of how different stats level based on how often you use them. So, we get the thing, and then we see the Dreadnought chasing Sid's airship around, and going back to town reveals that the princess is on it. So we gotta find where it's docked, which is surprisingly easy this time. So maybe I'm getting the hang of this? And we gotta save our friends, and then blow the ship up. Boom! Oh, but right before we do that, we see the Black Knight, and Chili recognizes their voice, but doesn't say from where. So, it's definitely Bluey. Bluey was always the evilest of the four anyway, let's be real. So we're basically winning the war now after that, I think, but the king has 3 last requests, and they're all pretty big asks. The first one doesn't matter, he just wants Gordykins to lead his army, good luck with that. Then he tells Minwu to go grab the ultimate magic, that's reserved for the end of the world, which seems like kinda overkill to me. The world isn't ending just because his kingdom changes hands, but whatever. The last one is for me, and he wants me to go find the dragoons and get them to come help. I'm only explaining so much plot this time around because this is the first time there's been so much plot to explain, and honestly it's awesome. I'm having way more fun with this than I had with even the first game. It's still very repetitive moment to moment, but I am all in on this plot right now. Okay, so my assignment was to find the dragoons, which means I need to take a ship, and that ship turned out to be staffed by some really weak and predictable pirates who took me out to sea and tried to take my stuff. But, of course, I wasn't about to just kill these pirates. After all, we're all criminals here. We're all rebelling against the Empire in our own ways here. Here in the middle of the ocean. I can't sail the ship. Please don't die, pirates. I need you. And yeah, they agreed to take me wherever I want to go, which means I get control of the ship now. Only problem is, since they were supposed to take me to the dragoons, I have no idea where I'm going, and I am now in control of the ship. So, while I'm wandering around, I happen to find this small island first that has a dungeon that doesn't seem too hard and is probably around the level I'm supposed to be at. I get part of the way through it, and then teleport out because I'm about to die. And then I go back out and eventually find the dragoons. Well, they're relatives, I guess, because they're all dead. But there is one wyvern left. I just need a pendant to be able to talk to him. And I go all over this dungeon trying to find it twice, but all I can find is this big underground lake. I'm totally at a loss here, so I go all the way back to that island and fight my way through it, eventually finding the treasure at the end, which is a black mask that I have no idea what to do with. And then I come back again, and it turns out it was right next to the door. Yes, I'm really like that. So I take the pendant to the wyvern, he talks to me until he dies, and he gives me an egg that I'm supposed to drop in the lake, so I do that. And yeah, there's a bit here with a fake princess, and you save the real one, but none of that really matters. But afterward, you get to attack Finn. I've always wished there were more chapters like this in RPGs where you've got like proper battles going on. Even if it all is just kinda implied, it'd be cooler if I could see it though, instead of just doing what I always do and going right through the front door and fighting the bad guys. As soon as we take the castle, my 2 friends here decide to just take their thrones back or whatever. I wish they wouldn't, because if we're doing a regime change, I would much prefer if we change it to something else, but they don't even ask me, even though I'm the one doing all the work. Which is pretty much par for the course for these guys. Royalty is just the worst, you know? Alright, and now they bring up the masks. I'm supposed to get this white one first, and it's right under this castle. So I go down there, and it sucks, but I fight through the whole thing, and now I've got both masks.
I know it's taking forever to go through every plot point of this story, but I'm actually skipping over so much more than I have in any other video too. There is just more story content here than I really know what to do with. And I'm not going to go through like every single future game beat by beat like this, but I do think it's important to see the juxtaposition and story between some of the really bare bones stories in these other games and just how deep and complex this one is. It's so much bigger and more involved than even the Final Fantasy game that came out just last year. Just the year before this one. I mean, keep that take anyway, it's fine.
Okay, so you use the masks to get a staff, and then you gotta use the staff to get a book. But then an interesting thing happens on the way there. You get swallowed by a monster. And inside the monster, there's a whole community of other schlubs who got vored before you did, including an actual dragoon by the name of Ricard. And once you get out, you can take Ricard back to the village where the dragoons used to live. And it seems like this isn't really how you get the plot moving, but if you do it, he says that he'll raise this kid to be a dragoon, and the kid's name is Cain. Now, I'm not an expert on Final Fantasy lore yet, but I'm just letting you know that I do vaguely remember this boy from Final Fantasy IV, which I have played a little bit of already, and I'm pretty sure he is a dragoon in that game, so that's just pretty cool. We're gonna have a solid link to that timeline when we get there. Yeah, so you use that wyvern that hatched from the egg to fly into this cyclone that the Emperor is like piloting. And it has taken out most of the starter towns, for real this time. You do go in there and take out the Emperor, but there's no way it's the final boss because of that Black Knight who's been walking around that we already know is not so secretly Bluey. So the whole time this victory dance scene's playing, I'm just like, yeah, right. Because they wouldn't have you name a character along with the 3 people you've been following on this whole adventure, and then just forget about that character, obviously. And yeah, the dance is interrupted by a dying guard who says Bluey has taken over the Emperor's throne, and you have to go talk to this thief, Paul, who I don't think I've mentioned yet, but he is one of those characters who's just kind of around the whole time, involved in the plot, but not like that involved, you know? Right. So Sid is actually at his place trying to recover from his wounds from way back earlier, and yeah, I say trying to recover because he doesn't recover at all. He just dies, which is weird because he does look younger than he does in Kingdom Hearts. I'm starting to question the whole timeline at this point, right? But then I got to the confrontation with Bluey where Ricard dies, and he reveals that his last name is actually Highwind, which is Sid's last name from Kingdom Hearts.
So that guy was just some other Sid then. He was in the same room as Ricard and they did not seem to know each other at all. So yeah, the one that we know from Kingdom Hearts is probably just named after this guy. And they both happen to work on airships, or well, gummy ships, airships. But yeah, I was going through all kinds of different Sid theories in my head up to this point. Like maybe this takes place before the time loop from Final Fantasy 1 is like over and it's a prequel to that, sort of, or a midquel. Or maybe it is actually after Kingdom Hearts and all of those other games. But as soon as Ricard said that his name was Highwind, I was like, okay, that's it. This is just some other Sid then. And I'm fine leaving it there for now. Sid was like an ancient creator of airships in the first game, but at the end of that game, when I broke the time loop, it was still 2,000 years in the past. But this one definitely connects to future games. So right now, I'm assuming this does take place after that loop was broken. Sid was still born and still made airships, as we see here, and that technology may or may not go on to contribute to a floating city. But he dies here. He's considered an important hero, probably because the airships become pretty popular. and that makes his name more recognizable than the rest of the people involved with this conflict. That's eventually going to get us to Sid Highwind from Kingdom Hearts.
Okay, so that is the point in the game where you finally confront Bluey, and instead of a fight, you just talk it out, and your whole party gets back together, thanks to the Emperor coming back from Hell just to announce that he's still super strong or whatever, and that you have to go to Hell and fight him. The dungeon is long and confusing, like you'd expect at this point from a final dungeon. I had stocked up on 99 ethers to get through it, and by the time I got to the final boss, I only had about 30 of those left. And I kind of think I've been over-leveled up to now anyway, because the boss fights have been super easy. Well, that is not a problem here. Quite the opposite, actually. I spent I don't know how long fighting this boss. It was frustrating. It was repetitive, and it felt like I was going nowhere at all. He can just heal himself for like 4k HP in a single turn, while one-shotting one of my party members at the same time, and he just does this whenever he wants. So that means I have to first revive, and then heal that party member, and then take about 10 turns getting his health back down to where it was every single time he does this, because even my strongest magic only hits him for about 400 HP. Sometimes he would do that drain attack twice in a row, meaning that the entire fight up to that point was pretty much invalidated just by sheer bad luck. It was honestly so much worse than fighting Chaos in the first game, because at least Chaos had the decency to kill me when I was losing a fight. The Emperor here never, ever did. I just eventually got so frustrated that I quit, due to rage. And then I looked up how to fight him, and it turned out there was some sword that was already in my inventory that you can deal 3,000 damage with every single turn. And the trick to beating the fight is just to know that you need that sword equipped. Even though the UI tells you the sword reduces your attack power to 11, and that's been true for the whole other fights, the rest of the game. This is the most frustrating thing I've ever seen in a game. I hate this so much. The first game, I kinda gave a pass on having this kind of solution to the final boss, when you had to keep casting Temper until you were dealing huge damage there, but that's something I could have potentially figured out before that point if I had bothered to pick up Temper, and besides, that was just the Dawn of Souls version. In the original game, he would have been an absolute pushover. So instead of rebalancing the entire game just to make this one fight doable, they made it hard but doable using some high-level strategies. Okay, this isn't like that. This is just a win button. This is just something that you have to know, or you can't beat the boss. And if you do it, then you do beat the boss. But as far as I saw, nobody in the game actually tells you about this strategy. This is terrible game design. I haven't been this mad at a game since 2 games ago when I got really mad at that other game. It feels like it's been ages. I am nostalgic for being mad at Matterhorn Screamer now, okay? Because that was a game that I only had to play for like 1 afternoon. This game took so many hours of my life, so much time. I was all ready to start saying nice things about this game. I did say nice things about this game, right up until this fight, and now I don't like it anymore. And I'm not even done yet, because guess what? Nomura did that thing that he does. There's a whole after story that I've got to play now that was introduced right here in the Dawn of Souls version. He was so proud of this game, he gave me some more of it to get through if I want to get the full lore. So I guess we'll just go through that too, since we're here. The emotional range that I've felt during the making of this video sure is something. So, in Soul of Rebirth, you play as the dead guys who died over the course of the game. You got Minwoo, Scott, who wasn't playable until now, but he's the prince that died near the beginning of that game, Joseph, and Ricard. They find themselves in a mirrored version of the last dungeon and have to fight their way out. Along the way, you grind a lot. You eventually get to this town where all the other people the Empire killed are chilling out, including our guy Sid. Nobody knows where they are, and Sid asks us to try and figure it out. So, there's a door down here that leads to a fight with Ultima Weapon, and a door up here that leads to the second part of that last mirrored dungeon. I didn't kill Ultima Weapon, but I did fight all the way through the last dungeon, even though it was one of my least favorite parts of the game. I just finished. At the end, you meet another version of the Emperor who says he's the good half, and if you will forgive him for all that bad stuff he did, he'll let you live in paradise forever. Unfortunately for him, I am never going to forgive him for that last boss fight, and my party feels the same way. For them, I guess it has more to do with how he destroyed their homes and families and bodies and so on. Yeah, so you get to fight him again, and this time you don't have the sword that makes you win. If you go online, it'll tell you that the strategy here is to already have equipped all of these guys with the best equipment that you had right before they died, and that way they'd have it with them in the afterlife. I did not do that, and I have spent days grinding in this game that I am already just so done with. And the fight goes about as well as it was going the first time I tried it with the party I actually spent the whole game with. So, I'm not doing this. I did beat the game. I did all the thing, okay? Like, you watched me do it, so what if I didn't 100% it? Besides, the Emperor already told me that he's the one who brought everyone here so that he could beg for forgiveness, so that's the lore thing, okay? Conclusion? Sure, here you go. We're done talking about this. I got other games to play still. Next on the list, we've got Mickey Mouse, the fourth game called Mickey Mouse, but only in Japan. In North America, this was released as the Bugs Bunny Crazy Castle, and it featured a completely different cast of characters. It was originally released for the Famicom Disk System as Roger Rabbit, which also featured a different set of characters before it was ported to the Game Boy as Mickey Mouse. So, that's a thing that they do now. I kind of called Final Fantasy I the first good Kingdom Hearts game, but this Mickey Mouse, has got to be the first great Kingdom Hearts game. I'm completely serious. This is a really fun game. The levels are designed really well. So, this time Minnie gets kidnapped. It's always someone getting kidnapped. A girl. It's always a girl getting kidnapped, let's be real. We got a new player in the kidnapping game here, someone with horns and a hood. Yeah, usually it's just one or the other, so pretty sure this is a new player, but they are borrowing a lot of Maleficent's henchmen, so probably a friend of hers. She's popular with the other villains, we already know that from Kingdom Hearts Final Mix, but yeah, Pete's here, and the pig and bird goons from Birth by Sleep are here. Also, the card soldiers, which isn't out of place if you played Mickey Mousecapades from 2 years ago, they were also working for Maleficent in that game. Then there's a few others that seem to be unique to this game. These guys with round noses, they're just regular guys. And then you got trees, I think, maybe like the ones from Snow White. And then Mexicans. There's also bones that just walk around. I'm not really sure why bones. I wouldn't question the skeletons, but nah, just one big bone. These should be brooms, right? They obviously should have gone with brooms here. That's a thing. Giant, sentient, individual bones aren't a thing. Oh, there's bees too. I don't think they're on payroll though. Pretty sure those are just bees. Bees in this universe have always been pretty expendable. Nobody bats an eye when Sora smacks a whole swarm of bees to keep them from popping a balloon on its way to lift up a bear to steal all of their honey. I work at a zoo, and if I killed a bee there on purpose, I'm pretty sure I would actually lose friends over it. So you basically collect all 8 keys in every level. You can really see how much work Mickey had to go through collecting keys before he became a Keyblade Master, and I think that's pretty cool thematically, you know, to give him a challenge like this in an early game that he'd be able to easily overcome in any of the modern games. It gives you a real sense of progression. He had to work really hard to get where he is. Like, in terms of door opening abilities, I mean. Like, when Sora gets denied the rank of Master, you're all, "Well, what more could you possibly ask of this boy?" That's you. That's what you sound like. But it really feels like the answer is back here in these classic games. Like, Mickey really has gone through a lot over the years. There are a bunch of tools that help you along the way, too. Like, you need this hammer to break rocks, and you need this pickaxe to climb over different rocks. There's bombs that you can plant to blow up your enemies, and arrows you can shoot at them. You can also push heavy stuff at them, and they'll die that way. The S bubbles will let you walk past enemies unharmed, but this pitcher of water will let you walk an enemy down. Like with a poker face. I'll stop. Cheese gives you an extra life, but that's not really useful anyway, since there's passwords for every level. The only time the amount of lives you've got left matters is the final boss, since there's no code for that, and you have to do the level over 2 if you die enough times there. I like the password system this game has. I think more games should do it like this. It's just a 4-letter password to get to any level you want. I would have 100% guessed some of these if I had tried. Some of them are exactly the kind of words you'd expect to be passwords to levels, like fire and ship. But I didn't try to skip ahead because I wanted to play all the levels. They're fun. And you'd never accidentally input a password you weren't supposed to know yet, so if you're cheating at this, it's because you're trying to. And what's wrong with making it easy to cheat at a game? It doesn't make you cheat, you just can. So yeah, most of the levels are just little puzzles you gotta solve, and they do involve timing in places, but it's mostly logic, which is nice. There is a final boss fight against this phantom guy. It's pretty tricky, but it's doable. And yeah, you save Minnie, and that's the whole game. Very solid. I was starting to worry I wasn't going to see anything this tightly designed in the entire series. I think, like, a lot of modern games have embraced player freedom to the point where they're forgetting how nice it can be to solve a really simple, well-designed puzzle. And I'm not saying Kingdom Hearts has gotten as bad about this as, like, you know, Breath of the Wild. But there haven't been any Kingdom Hearts levels that call for this level of precise, limited, intuitive player actions before. I mean, I don't think so anyway. I guess if I'm gonna find that anywhere in the main games, it's gonna be in Remind, and I haven't actually played Remind yet. I'm actually playing through the main games with 2 of my roommates in the background who, like, haven't played them before, like, in addition to this project. I'm not dragging them through all 300 plus side games, though. That's just for when I need a second player. Otherwise, they can watch these videos and get the rest of the lore. We are going to play the mobile games, though, which I haven't done yet, so, all the important lore stuff from the mobile games I'll kind of be learning also just in the background, whenever we get to those. What can you do? Okay, just 2 games left. Next up, DuckTales. This is considered by some people to be one of the best NES games of all time. I've never played it before, and I'm excited to see how it actually stacks up. Now, there is a 2013 remake of this game that adds a lot of story content, and normally I would just play that one, but I did the research and it turns out DuckTales Remastered is a pretty different game. It has different levels, more detailed story that begins and ends totally differently, different mechanics, etc. So I've decided to just count that game as a separate entry, and whenever I get to 2013 in this series, I'll play and review it then. In this game, you play as Scrooge McDuck. You get to select a level from the computer from the Amazon jungle, Transylvania, some mines in Africa, the Himalayas, and the moon. Now, we can't say for absolute sure that this takes place on Earth just because it has locations with the same names. Remember, in Kingdom Hearts 2, a planet called the Land of Dragons has a China on it, and that was kind of similar to the China on Earth at one point in history, not really so much anymore. Plus, the moon being here confirms they can travel through space, but given the fact that we've seen 3 characters from this game alongside Mickey Mouse and Minnie Mouse, who are confirmed to live on Earth in the game Mickey's Space Adventure, and that they're all in Duckburg in the game Donald Duck's Playground, which has a lot of the same 3-letter codes for airports as US cities listed in the airport minigame. And given that this pilot specifically asks you if you want to go back to Duckburg when you talk to him, I think that all pretty heavily implies that Duckburg is on Earth. Everyone in this game except some of the enemies happens to be a duck, so I don't know, I think Scrooge might just have a pretty big family. Yeah, so Donald isn't anywhere in this game, even though they're definitely related, but Louie, Huey, and Dewey from the other games are. There's also that pilot I just talked about, this Grandma Duck, and Gizmo Duck, who's like a cyborg. He's one of the few characters they actually give a name in this. Also Dracula Duck, who's like the final boss, but none of them are McDucks, they're all just ducks. Actually, what are the boys' last names? Are they ducks? Are they McDucks? I don't think Jiminy Cricket even learned their last names. Oh yeah, there's also this girl duck. At first I thought maybe it was like Huey experimenting, but she was immediately like, oh no, Huey's been kidnapped, so that dashed any hope I had of that. She also calls Scrooge her uncle, so they're also related, I guess. Right, so the main goal of this game is to get money. It turns out Scrooge McDuck is not a very good guy. You just go around treasure hunting, fighting whoever has the treasure, and then taking it yourself. This is where we meet the Beagle Boys, who just keep showing up. It looks like they're also trying to steal treasures, but that definitely doesn't make it okay. Actually, you're definitely worse, because when you beat the game it says, Scrooge McDuck, still the richest duck in the world, and yeah, these guys aren't ducks, but it really looks like most people in this world are, so you're pretty much for sure richer than they are. Even at the beginning of this game, you were already the richest duck. They might not need it either, I don't know, they definitely need it more than you do, though. You shouldn't be out treasure hunting if you've already got the most treasure. That's just mean. Especially not in, like, an African mine. I started off in the Amazon because that's the first place. It became obvious right away that for this video to come out in a reasonable time frame, I was gonna have to ask for a few wishes from the Game Genie. If you're paying attention, you'll probably remember that this is no big deal. I did learn pretty soon afterward, though, that the Amazon part was actually one of the harder levels, which is mostly because these bees attack at just the right height, with just enough variation that I cannot consistently dodge these bees at all, more so than any other enemy in the entire game. I had pretty much no problem fighting through the mines or the Himalayas. Anyway, for collectibles, you've got a few unique items that you need to progress, like keys and stuff. And then there's jewels, which give you money, hidden treasures that give you a lot of money, this coin that makes you invincible, and then desserts that give you more health. Most of these are going to be ice cream. A nice touch here was using white ice cream cones, because this is before Scrooge McDuck perfected the recipe for sea salt ice cream in Kingdom Hearts 2. Nice bit of continuity there. I gotta mention that there are a lot of hidden side areas all throughout these maps, and those are a lot of fun to find. Since I cheated, the first level is the only one that I did a bunch of times, but I was finding secrets the whole time, and it feels like they're all pretty densely packed, and will always reward you for going out of your way. That's a good way to design levels in games, I think. There are so many side characters that Scrooge seems to already know pretty well that I haven't had a chance to meet yet, and it really gives the feeling that there's a whole dimension of lore that I'm not seeing, which is a really cool way of fleshing the world out. And honestly, that's what Kingdom Hearts is really all about, right? Getting a glimpse into all these really different worlds and stories, thinking about what kinds of shenanigans these characters might get up to when we're not looking. Here it really feels like Scrooge is off on his own adventures all the time that we don't get to see. I'll definitely be interested to see how the remaster expands on all of this established lore, and what it decides to do with all of these other characters. Although by then other DuckTales games will already exist that I assume are going to flesh out some of these guys too, so it's also going to be nice to see how well we get to know this cast of ambiguously blood-related ducks in the future games. So, the last game I'll be covering for this particular video is the Final Fantasy Legend, or Makai Toshi Saga, as it's called in Japan. Okay, my first impression is that there are a lot of mechanics, and it's kind of overwhelming. I try not to hug guides too much, but when you show me a menu like this, as soon as I hit start, I mean, what am I supposed to do? This decision is going to follow me through the entire game, and I have no context for it. So, yeah, I started looking things up right away. Honestly, the lack of information in this game is the kind of thing you would, like, never see anymore, but what's wild is how much of the information that's just hard to parse even after you've looked it up. Like, okay, from the beginning, there are 8 choices on screen, but there are really only 3. Human, mutant, or monster. There are minor stat differences between male and female characters, but I just made my party all women, and I'm not missing out by doing that. Monsters don't have gender, although in the lore, some of them do. More on that later. So, the main difference is how every character gets stronger. Mutants are actually the most normal because they get stronger randomly through fighting battles. Unlike every other game, this one won't tell you when you've gotten stronger, and it won't give you any options as to how you get stronger. So your abilities will get cycled around a lot, and there is just nothing you can do about that. I had 2 mutants in my party. I only had 4 characters to name them with, so their names are Bork, which is kind of like Brook, and Corn, which is the first other name I thought of. I also had 1 human who I just named after my favorite Madoka Magica character, Mommy, because again it fit, and 1 monster who I named after my cat, Jax. Alright, so humans have to progress by buying stuff, which means early on, when you don't even have enough money for equipment, they're not very good, but you can level them as much as you want to once you're rich. Really says a lot about society, or whatever. And then monsters only level up by eating meat from other monsters, but it's actually really complicated. See, if you were to just go around eating every monster's meat that you find, you'd be getting stronger and weaker all over the board. You'd usually only be about as strong as the average monster you're fighting, which means you wouldn't have a lot of HP either. I did experiment for a while, but Jax was about as useful in the game as he is in real life, until I just looked up which meat was going to make him big and strong. It depends on the monster you already are, which monsters are going to be better to eat. Although high level meat will turn you into higher level monsters, it's easier to move up in level than down by eating random meats, but you can totally go down, and at the early stages of the game, well, you're working with some pretty weak monsters. Okay, so once you've made your party, your goal is to try and climb the tower to paradise, but it's sealed by the magic of black. So, you get to wander around at the base for a while, which is occupied by 3 kings in 3 castles. Sword King, Shield King, and Armor King. Not as cool as the one from Tekken, but surprisingly chill. See, I actually really like what they do with these guys. They all have personalities that match their names, so like, Sword King will just attack you on sight, and has a castle full of strong monsters, okay? You get the sword by killing him and taking it. Very straightforward. But Armor King will actually embrace you and any other visitors that want to come to his castle. There's this girl he's in love with, but she won't marry him, and he asks if you can find out why. And when you get to the village, the girl is actually a monster, which I just think is cool. Nobody draws attention to this, it's just how she is. This is the part where you realize monsters do have genders in the lore, and don't just come with different sprites or stat differences like the other races. Which isn't the cool part, obviously. The cool part is that where the other Final Fantasy games have just been like, monsters are evil, straight up, this game not only lets you have them in your party, but there are NPCs and monsters finding love out here for real. And yeah, she says she can't marry Armor King because the bandit leader threatened to wipe out her village if she doesn't marry him. So, all you have to do is kill the bandit leader, and problem solved. They live happily ever after, as far as I know. Then Shield King is just extremely guarded. His guards won't attack you, but they let you know you're not welcome and throw you out if you talk to them. But once you've gotten the other 2 pieces, his steward kills him and takes the shield for himself. I just think it's cool how there's like themes worked in at all, you know? This feels a lot more artistic and intentional than anything we've seen in this series yet, and I can definitely see why it led to so many sequels already. Nomura put a lot of thought into this one, I guess. Alright, so after that you can start moving up in the tower, and I was scared this part was going to be really hard, but after all that grinding I did figuring things out, it wasn't. It was harder enemies than there were on the ground, but Sword King's castle had enemies showing up in bigger numbers than this part during a single fight, so I was ready for it. You only ever see a couple of monsters on screen at a time, but there's a counter next to their names when you attack them that says how many of the same kind of enemy are just in line behind them. The first few times this really tripped me up because it was like, defeated, but then the sprite was still there attacking me, and I'm like, huh? But yeah, that's a thing. Weapon durability is also a thing. You have to keep an eye on all of your weapons because they break. You'll want to make sure that you've got another one on you. The weapons mostly scale with either strength or agility, and the stat that starts higher depends on your gender. Boys get more strength, but girls get more agility, which sounds annoying, but honestly, this is a win for the girls. Rapiers are really good starter weapons, and you get to use bows and whips, where the boy weapons would have just been like long swords, axes, and hammers. Yawn. There's also unarmed weapons, which are actually great, especially at low levels, because instead of your stats, they scale with how much you've used them up. So the more you punch, the stronger your punches until you run out. It's like that quote from Bruce Lee, I think, where he's afraid of a guy who's done the same kick 1,000 times. You know what I'm talking about, right? Yeah, so that's a really cool weapon type, but once you've gone up a few floors in the tower, there's a chest here containing a Colt. As in the gun. There are straight up guns in this game now. This has got to be one of the best RPGs of all time. How had I not heard of this before? Like, legit, at this point, I'm only like 3 hours into the game, but I had to force myself to put it down and start writing about it. This blows Final Fantasy II out of the water so hard. Matter of fact, all 3 games I've played since Final Fantasy II have been super good. So about every 5 floors you climb up the tower, you'll get to a new area, and this Hat Man is always going to give you some advice for getting to the next floor on the tower. I don't think I need to go through the whole plot of this one step by step, because I don't plan on doing that with every game. And also, I forgot to hit record for a big chunk of this one, my bad. But really quickly, you need orbs to get past these parts of the world, and that always means getting it from a powerful boss guy. The first one is on this group of islands controlled by some brothers, and everything is pretty hard to find, including the boat, the islands you gotta get to, and especially the whirlpool that you also need to jump inside of. And yeah, after that it's straightforward enough. You find a guy who's making things suck for other people, and you beat him up. Then you got this cloud world, and here you're gonna join the bad guys and infiltrate their hideout, only to betray them and save these 2 girls. But then one of them betrays you, and then you bust out of jail and fight the boss guy. I don't have a bunch of the footage, so here's a reenactment instead. There's only one save file. I can't just go back and get that missing footage without putting tens of hours into this game again for it. Anyway, after that, you get to a destroyed city, and this time there's an invincible enemy that chases you whenever you're on the surface, and you just have to run away and hope you make it. And you travel through sewers until you get a bike that lets you go longer without encountering him, but you still have like 8 steps until you've got the thing that lets you fight him. Like 8 things you have to do, not literal steps. Although 8 of those at this point would be pretty scary too. So then, and this is important, you get to the next guy who doesn't really have a floor of the tower, but there are some rooms scattered around where people talk about him, and also one room full of dead kids that I wish I had footage of, because it is just pixels, but it's pretty bold of Nomura to put child corpses in a Kingdom Hearts game, even if it is one of the more obscure spin-offs. Okay, but anyway, this guy is Ashura, and he's really powerful, basically impossible to beat at my current level, because even just getting to him took such a massive toll on my party. People kept dying or getting turned into stone before I had a shot at this fight, but luckily I did have Saw equipped, and Saw is an ability that lets you kill strong bosses without having to try very hard, so I just used that, and it worked. But he did send me back to the base of the tower, where all the friends I had met along my adventure were waiting for me. The climb up the tower is way easier this time. The only tricky thing is that you get interrupted by even stronger versions of all the bosses along the way, except for Ashura for some reason. These fights probably would have been really hard if I didn't already have Saw, which just lets you win against bosses in one hit, so it's pretty easy because of that. And then you get to the very end of the game, and it turns out you were playing a game the whole time, and Hat Man was responsible for the whole thing. Yeah, so he made this game because, like, young people or whatever, it doesn't matter. You just use Saw on him, and that kills him too, so you can win the game that way. And then you did it. You saved the game from the guy who made it. So, yeah, if you've been wondering how this game fits into the canon, it turns out it's about the same way Tron does. It's just a game within the world of the other games in the end.
And that wraps up the last Kingdom Hearts game of the 1980s. We did it, gang. I did most of the work, but you watched me do it, and that's uh well, okay, to be honest, you could have helped me out more, but I'm not going to hold that against you. Just like subscribe to my channel if you haven't done that before and talk about it. I'm not on social media, so if either of my viewers are on Tumblr, then please tumble about my videos. And if you're on X, then please excrete about me. I did notice I have a Patron account when I was making this, so like pay me there if you want. Anyway, we're not quite done here because I think we're far enough in that you might be confused about what's happened so far. And I'm going to go to a corkboard to talk about what we've learned and try to map all these games onto a timeline. So, the first thing I've got to deal with is getting all of the mainline Kingdom Hearts games on a timeline, which is something I've actually done enough times in my free time that I can blow through this part pretty quickly. It is complicated, but who's the expert here? So first up, you've got Kingdom Hearts Key and Back Cover. And I haven't played Key, almost nobody in the US has, but that is technically where the timeline starts. Now that game ends with a universe reset, which is absolutely going to be significant in assembling this timeline. It also has a lot of stuff from the future that's showing up because of time travel, which hopefully isn't going to be as relevant, but just know that if there's something from this game that you're trying to use to place other things, don't do that because it's from the future. Right after that, you've got Union Cross, which is the exact same game again until it isn't anymore, because this one is right after that universe reset, and all the time travel stuff still happens again in exactly the same way. Nomura doesn't make this stuff easy. Then 200 years later, you've got Kingdom Hearts Dark Road. I'll explain more about these games if and when this series gets to them, but for now, you just need to know where the timelines are and where they could potentially intersect with the side games. After that, another 65 years pass before Birth by Sleep. And then it's just a quick 10-year jump to Kingdom Hearts 1, a game that you've probably heard of. And just as that's wrapping up, three other things happen. First, we've got Kingdom Hearts Concert First Breath. Yeah, if you're new to the series, there is a live concert that's canon to the games. Welcome to the Kingdom Hearts Deep lore. Also, Kingdom Hearts Birth by Sleep 0.2, a fragmentary passage, and Kingdom Hearts 358 over 2 days. When you say these all out loud at once, it sounds pretty ridiculous. Okay, so days here is going to take place over an entire year, and right at the beginning of that year, Kingdom Hearts Chain of Memories is going to happen, and right as that year wraps up, Kingdom Hearts 2 happens. Okay, we're in the home stretch. So Kingdom Hearts Coded, Kingdom Hearts 3D Dream Drop Distance, and Kingdom Hearts 3. And then just 1 year later, Kingdom Hearts Melody of Memory. See, it's not too complicated if you just say the names of the games and provide no other information, and ignore all the secret endings that have completely different spots on the timeline. Now for the hard part. Every game we've covered so far in this series. So I'm going to start with Final Fantasy because it has the broadest scope, taking place over a period of 2,000 years. Now, the world doesn't change all that much during this time because it's ruled by Chaos, who I guess just wants there to be like monsters and a few villages the whole time. The only thing in this doomed future that really matters is this Luthinian in the Dawn of Souls version saying that Sid built the airships, which connects it to Final Fantasy II, and so far 2 could be in either timeline, but we did get Sid inventing airships in that game, so until further notice, I'm assuming that it's somewhere near the beginning of that new timeline that you create by defeating chaos in the past at the end of 1. Wait, this is Final Fantasy 2. I grabbed the wrong one because I didn't have my glasses. Next, let's try and map out a timeline for Mickey Mouse. This is going to be tricky. He's a lot older than he looks, and a lot of his history is still not very concrete, like at all. So Dark Road explains that time moves at different rates in different worlds, which, yeah, that tracks with science or whatever. It does mean that this Final Fantasy timeline is even more subject to change than it already is, but that's Future Brook's problem. Now, I'm pretty sure it doesn't get confirmed for certain that the Mickey Mouse, Donald, Goofy, Chip, and Dale we see in Union Cross are from the future, but it is heavily implied. Most things in this game are. The Book of Prophecies projects a bunch of stuff from the future, including all the worlds you travel to in that game, and Mickey and Co. are from a different world and travel here by mysterious means. Now, the way Mickey normally travels through worlds in this series is by using a star shard. And he specifically says in Key and Union Cross that the star shard was not what brought him to this world, and that is unusual for him. So, the most likely explanation is that in this game, he's a vision of the future being projected back in time through the Book of Prophecies, just like Aladdin, Snow White, and the rest. All this to say, the beginning of the main Mickey Mouse timeline probably starts somewhere in this big gap. We don't know much about Mickey's early life, at least yet. He used to work for Pete on his steamboat, and then again later as a musketeer. At some point, he becomes king of Disney Castle, and at some point, he starts an apprenticeship under Yin Sit, where he starts learning magic and how to wield a Keyblade. It's not until the events of Birth by Sleep that he's able to use the Star Shard to travel between worlds, which is also when he is granted the rank of Keyblade Master. So, yeah, again, there's no way he was using the Star Shard 200 years ago. This is where he gets that power, and any universe hopping that doesn't have a specific explanation is probably going to take place after Birth by Sleep. There's just one problem. What about Mickey's space adventure? What about Earth, the planet that Duckburg is on? How did he get from there to Disney Castle, which is on a planet called Disney Town? That's not the same planet. The Sorcerer's Apprentice has to go over here when he's apprenticing for Yin Sid. That's where he learns magic. The 1988 Mickey Mouse game has to be on this side somewhere since it takes place at Disney Castle. Mickey's Space Adventure has to be somewhere back here since it's still on Earth. Same with Donald Duck's Playground. Now, Mickey and Donald presents an interesting case because his time as a firefighter is actually referenced in Kingdom Hearts 2. I'm not certain of this, but I think the Cornerstone of Light was mostly a gateway through time and not a means of interdimensional space travel. So, until I have any reason to say otherwise, I'm going to say that Mickey and Donald takes place over here after he's moved to Disney Town. Now, Louie, Scrooge, Donald, Dewey, Goofy, the Beagle Boys, and Huey all end up in different worlds later on, but for now, I'm going to assume they're all traveling between worlds at around the same point in time, since they seem to show up in similar places more often than not. And I'm going to assume for now that anything taking place on Earth is also earlier in their respective timelines than anything taking place in Disney Town. So for that reason, DuckTales is going to go right over here. Mickey in the Great Outdoors looks more like Earth than Disney Town to me. I'm going to stick that here for now. Mickey Mousecapade, absolutely toward the end of the timeline. We've already got Pete and Maleficent working together to kidnap Alice in that game. It's got to be like right before Birth by Sleep, if not even later. Donald Duck, this game takes place in Italy, which is on Earth. Donald's Alphabet Chase, a little bit trickier. All we really have to go on here is the fact that Mickey Mouse is the biggest celebrity in whatever world they're on, which is more likely Disney Town than Earth. I just learned that the Matterhorn is a real mountain in the Alps, so that's another one for Earth. So for this group of characters, that just leaves Donald Duck's Speedboat, Mickey Mouse 1981, Mickey Mouse 1984, Donald the Hero, and Mickey Mouse 1989. This is all tentative anyway, so I'm just going to break these up based on vibes. 1989 Mickey Mouse feels a lot more like the Disney Town games than the Earth games. You've got Pete and Card Soldiers as villains here, which are both things in Mickey Mousecapades. I'm going to put this one right next to that one. Donald Duck's Speedboat, this one feels more like Earth to me. The last three are hard. Okay, raising chickens, that's an Earth activity, I guess. You've got to stay put for a while to raise chickens. Donald the Hero, Earth, I guess. It doesn't matter. And then Mickey Mouse 1984. This is the circus one for Game & Watch. Let's just stick that over here in Disney Town. Okay, great. There's only a few left. So Snow White, I'm not even sure what happens in this game. The graphics are so hard to interpret. I literally can't tell you who the player character is. It's just some guy in a hat. Dopey? Possibly. I'm just gonna slap it right in front of Birth by Sleep. I don't know if I should even count this as canon since it's an unfinished game anyway. All the unfinished games have this problem. They're impossible to place. This, Dumbo's Circus, and Donald Duck's Speedboat. Random guesses. Matter of fact, the one thing we do know about the mysterious circus elephant is that his homeworld is destroyed in Kingdom Hearts 1. So, Dumbo's Circus, right here, and about to be destroyed forever. Winnie the President in the 100-Acre Wood. Right now, it can go anywhere except for during the events of all of these games. Probably toward the beginning, that's just the trend with these, although putting it after everything would make about as much sense right now. We're going to keep an eye on this Christopher Robin character and see what they do with him. Okay, so lastly, we've got the Final Fantasy Legend and the Tron games. Now, Mazatron has you playing as Flynn from Kingdom Hearts Dream Drop Distance, like I said before, although I don't think it specifies which Flynn. I think this is Kevin, the dad Flynn, which would put it, let's say 30 years before Dream Drop Distance. So by that point in time, they've got the technology to upload the creator of a game into the game itself, which must be what happened with the Final Fantasy Legend. So, since Mazatron has Flynn fighting the Master Computer, and the Master Computer forces people to play games, I think Tron and Tron Deadly Discs have to happen before Mazatron. As for Adventures of Tron, that could be Tron roaming the world freely after the Master Computer is already destroyed. So I'm just going to leave these four in release order, since they all came out right at the same time anyway. The Tron Saga. Whew! Okay. Now that all of that's taken care of. Jeez. Okay, I guess I did say I'd rank the games. That's going to be hard. Okay, so Final Fantasy II was a really fun game about midway through, and then I hated it by the time I put it down. I think it has to at least go above Final Fantasy I, though. Let's go. Alright, I'll tell you right now, my favorite of this whole bunch was the Final Fantasy Legend. What a hidden gem this game was. Now, it does kind of do the same thing as Final Fantasy II, where there's an easy way to kill the final boss if you know about it, and if you don't, it's a really hard fight. But there are three key differences that make me okay with it here. One, the game is just better overall in pretty much every way. Neither that intuitive. That's not a strength that a lot of games really had in the 80's. But it's a lot more fun to play. Two, it's consistent. The blood sword doesn't work the same way for most of the game. It just kills the final boss and like a few other enemies that you can use it on.
But I was using saw to cheese bosses left and right, so it's a consistent weapon. It works the same way the whole time. Number three, I found out the easy way by looking it up first, so I didn't have to go through the pain of wasting my time getting all mad. I just walked right up to the boss, popped it in one turn, and destroyed him. Yeah, that one is subjective, but it sure improved my experience. And then number four, Saw wasn't supposed to work the way that it does in the first place. That was a mistake that Nomura made, which means you can't really account for it when talking about the game's design philosophy. It's an incredible game. It's one you should absolutely play if you're interested in that sort of thing. I don't even care that it has zero effect on the canon. Like, how can it be a waste of my time if I'm having a blast playing it, right? Okay. I do think that Mickey Mouse, 1989 Mickey Mouse for the Game Boy, was a pretty close second. I actually enjoyed this game for the entirety of the time I was playing it, and it felt like an accomplishment when I beat it. So, yeah, great game. One that actually did force me to solve puzzles in an intuitive way. Um, okay, I could have easily cheated, so I guess forced is kind of a strong, but like I didn't cheat, and I'm glad I didn't cheat. Great game. Yeah, great game. Okay, and then yeah, so since those two are up there, obviously, where DuckTales has got to go third. The distance between these three games and the rest in the series is just massive. Like, it really kicks off in 89. You can see where Nomura is applying the lessons he learned from all those early projects to these. The amount of polish on these three games is head and shoulders above all the ones that came before him. This is, to me, the weakest of these three. But like I'm pretty sure it's some people's favorite game, like even today, which is, saying something. The soundtrack does go pretty hard too. I don't think it really talked about the soundtrack in the like main video, but it does have a really good soundtrack. Um, so I'm actually gonna put Donald's Alphabet Chase uh right up here at the four spot. Those graphics are just ridiculous. It's not like got the most in terms of gameplay, but it's already getting to be kind of slim pickings in terms of gameplay compared to what I just put in front of it there. And it is wild how pretty this is for a game that came out in 1988. Way ahead of the competition in terms of visuals here, and yeah, those did matter a lot more in the 80s when most games were ugly as butts. Um, yeah, speaking of Donald Duck's Speedboat, actually, I'm going to put right after that. This is the only Kingdom Hearts game from the 70s, and it's still better than all the games that came out for, like, the next decade after it. Yeah, as a matter of fact, I do think Donald Duck's Speedboat is better than Final Fantasy 1 or 2. I know I said that it wasn't good, and that Final Fantasy is good, and I still stand by that. That's still true. But that's because Donald Duck's Speedboat is basically nothing. It's a nothing game that I happen to enjoy from beginning to end. I have unambiguously good feelings toward it. It's less good than those other two, but it's better. I'm allowed to think that. You know what else is better than Final Fantasy games? Uh, Nothing. Nothing. I'm gonna put those two next. That's gonna be yeah my 6 and 7. Um, Tron Deadly Discs after that. Obviously, yeah. Then Winnie the President and the 100 Acre Wood. Um, oh yeah, Mickey's Space Adventure. Probably right after that. It had some annoying mechanics, but it was also just really interesting. Yeah, Tron for sure. Right after that, the light cycles were really cool. I wish the game had had more of the like light cycles. Um, all right, yeah, Donald Duck. I definitely had some fun with that one. I like that it had a two-player mode. It's kind of the bottom of the barrel from here out, though. Let's see. Yeah, Mickey Mouse, 1988, the one where you're hunting ghosts. And then right after that, let's say Mickey Mouse 1981, the egg gathering game. Oh, I didn't hate Mickey in the Great Outdoors. It was definitely a step forward at the time it came out, especially like for visuals, which is something. Then Adventures of Tron, I guess. It's kind of a mess, but I wouldn't call it a broken mess like I would all the rest of these. So yeah, then I gotta go with where is it? Yeah, Mickey Mousecapades. There it is. For being my favorite broken mess. Still a terrible game, but it's got the most for you out of all of these terrible games by a pretty big margin. Um, Donald Duck's Playground. Right after that. As long as you play on easy, it's at least easy. Oh God, how am I gonna rank the rest of these? So, okay, Mickey and Donald. God, okay, fine. Matterhorn Screamer. I was kind of hoping to put it dead last, but it is technically playable despite not being fully completable. The part where you have to ride the lift is pretty cool. Oh, this is painful. The Sorcerer's Apprentice, because I can think of one good thing to say about that game. It's a little bit of fun to control the blast of magic, just like a little bit. And then Snow White. Um, okay, yeah, then Mazatron. I would never play Mazatron on purpose, and I barely played it for the video. It's the only game that did physical damage to my eyeballs. Actually, yeah, I spared you the master computer fight in that video by not making it that far, but it really hurts to look at, trust me. I really don't want to show it to you. But I mean, is it the worst game here? No, there were some really bad games here. Yeah, so out of the three remaining games, the next one down is actually pretty easily Mickey Mouse 1984. It's simpler than these other two, but it is a game that was finished being developed. Then yeah, Donald the Hero. I guess I have to put above Dumbo Circus because even though I could do in Donald the Hero is move around, I could move around. It got that part right at least. So then, yeah, Dumbo Circus has to take this spot in dead last. Um, I don't think it's probably ever going to come out of that last place spot. They don't really tend to release games that are that unfinished anymore. Well, I don't. Did they even release this one at the time? I don't know. It's super not finished. You'd have to have a pretty unambitious game to even compete with it in terms of just like how little of it actually there is. Okay, yeah, so that's my definitive ranking of all the Kingdom Hearts games from the 1970s and 80s. Next time around, I'll start on a decade that people actually care about. Can't wait for that. Okay, bye.